Hey, you! Stop right there! The shout tore through the quiet street like a gunshot. A tall black man froze mid-step, his shoulders tightening as red and blue lights washed over the cracked pavement outside Jefferson Elementary School. The building loomed behind him, dark, silent, boarded windows staring blankly into the night. Officer Daniel Whitaker stepped out of his patrol car slowly, hand already resting on his holster. It was nearly 11:30 p.m. The school had been closed for years, and this was the third night in a row Whitaker had seen the same man standing near its gates. "Hands where I can see them," Whitaker barked, his voice sharp, rehearsed, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The man raised his hands immediately. "Yes, sir," he said calmly. "No problem." Whitaker frowned. The voice didn't match what he'd expected. No slurring, no anger, no panic. Just tired. "What are you doing here?" Whitaker demanded, shining his flashlight directly into the man's face. The beam revealed a man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, clean-shaven, weathered eyes, a knit cap pulled low, a heavy coat zipped all the way up, despite the mild spring night. "I didn't ask what you were just doing," Whitaker snapped, stepping closer. "I asked what you're doing here." The man swallowed, then spoke evenly. "I come here every night." Whitaker's jaw tightened. That wasn't the right answer. "You realize this is private property," he said. "School's been shut down since 2019. No loitering, no trespassing." "Yes, sir, I know." Whitaker scoffed. "Then why are you standing outside a closed school at midnight?" The man hesitated. Just for a second. Whitaker caught it and pounced. "ID, now." The man slowly reached into his coat pocket. Whitaker's hand twitched toward his weapon. "Easy," Whitaker warned. "Slow." "I am," the man replied quietly, pulling out a worn wallet and handing over his driver's license. Whitaker took it and stepped back, flashlight flicking between the photo and the man's face. Marcus Hill. Age, 51. Address, across town. Whitaker glanced back up. "You don't live anywhere near here, Marcus." "No, sir." "So you drive here every night?" Whitaker pressed. "Yes." "For what?" Whitaker snapped. Marcus exhaled through his nose. "For something important." Whitaker laughed, a short, humorless sound. "That's not an answer." Marcus met his gaze. "It's the only one I can give." The air shifted. Whitaker felt it, that familiar tightening in his chest, the feeling that came when someone wasn't playing by the script, when they didn't act scared enough, or angry enough, or guilty enough. "You refusing to cooperate?" Whitaker asked. "No, sir," Marcus said, calmly. "I'm answering respectfully." Whitaker stepped closer, invading his space. Respect would be not sneaking around a closed school at night. "I'm not sneaking. I'm standing right out in the open." Whitaker's face hardened. "Turn around," he ordered, hands on the fence. Marcus hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. Whitaker's voice rose. "Now." Marcus turned slowly and placed his palms against the cold chain-link fence. A car passed at the far end of the street but didn't slow. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Whitaker patted him down briskly, checking pockets, waistband, jacket seams. He found nothing but keys, a folded piece of paper, and a small flashlight. "No weapon," Whitaker muttered, almost disappointed. He stepped back. "So," Whitaker said, folding his arms, "care to explain yourself now?" Marcus stared straight ahead at the dark schoolyard. "Officer," he said carefully, "I'm not hurting anyone." "That's not the point." "What is the point, then?" Marcus asked, softly. Whitaker bristled. "The point is you don't belong here." The words hung in the air. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, something had changed. Not anger, something heavier. "I belong here more than you know," Whitaker said. Whitaker's jaw clenched. "That's supposed to mean something to me?" Marcus didn't answer. Whitaker turned and radioed in. "Dispatch, I've got a suspicious male outside Jefferson Elementary, running ID now." Static crackled back. "Copy that." Whitaker looked back at Marcus. "Let me guess. You got a story. Something sentimental. Something you think'll make me feel bad." Marcus finally turned around. "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking to be left alone." Whitaker laughed again. "That's not how this works." He glanced at the folded paper sticking out of Marcus's pocket. "What's that?" Marcus hesitated. Whitaker pointed. "Don't make me ask twice." Marcus slowly pulled it out and handed it over. Whitaker unfolded it. His eyes scanned the page, then paused. The paper wasn't a map or a letter. It was a schedule, handwritten. Times, dates, names. Whitaker frowned. "What is this?" Marcus swallowed. "Attendance." "Attendance for what?" Whitaker snapped. "For children," Marcus replied. Whitaker looked up sharply. "Excuse me?" "I tutored. Used to, right here, before they shut the place down." Whitaker stared at him. "You expect me to believe that?" "Yes." Whitaker shook his head. "You're telling me you drive across town every night to stand outside a closed school because, what, nostalgia?" Marcus's voice cracked, just barely. "Because this was the last place my son felt safe." The words hit harder than Whitaker expected. He recovered quickly. "That doesn't give you permission to trespass." "I'm not inside. I never go in. I just stand here." "Why?" Whitaker demanded. Marcus looked up at the dark building. "Because if I don't, it feels like I'm abandoning him all over again." Silence stretched between them. Whitaker shifted his weight. "That's not my problem," he said firmly. Marcus nodded. "I know." Whitaker handed back the paper and the ID. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave, and you're not coming back." Marcus's shoulders sagged. "Yes, sir." He turned to go. Then Whitaker added, almost as an afterthought, "And if I see you here again, I won't be this patient." Marcus stopped. He didn't turn around. "Officer," he said quietly, "I've been coming here every night for 3 years." Whitaker frowned. And tonight is the first time anyone's ever asked me why." Marcus walked away. Whitaker stood there longer than he meant to, staring at the closed school. Something about the man's voice, something about that paper, something about the way he said attendance, it stayed with him.
And for the first time since putting on the badge, Officer Daniel Whitaker wasn't sure he'd done the right thing. Officer Daniel Whitaker told himself it was nothing. Just another late-night stop. Just another man lingering where he shouldn't. Just another situation handled by the book. That's what he repeated as he drove away from Jefferson Elementary, the dark outline of the closed school shrinking in his rearview mirror. But the words wouldn't let him go. Attendance. Children. 3 years. Whitaker shook his head, gripping the steering wheel tighter as he turned onto Maple Avenue. The radio murmured softly. Routine chatter, noise complaints, a stalled car near the freeway. Normal. Familiar. Yet his mind wasn't on the road. It was on a man standing alone under a flickering streetlight, hands steady against a chain-link fence, voice calm even as authority pressed down on him. This was the last place my son felt safe. Whitaker exhaled sharply. People said things when they were cornered. Emotional lines, stories meant to soften consequences. He'd heard them all in his 17 years on the force. But this one hadn't sounded rehearsed. It had sounded practiced, like a truth repeated so many times it had worn smooth. When Whitaker reached home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. His wife, Linda, was already asleep. Their kids were grown. College, careers, lives that no longer orbited around bedtime stories and scraped knees. He poured himself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen sink, staring out into the darkness. Why a school, he wondered. Not a park, not a bench, not a church. A school closed for budget cuts and asbestos concerns. A place frozen in time, its playground rusting, classrooms sealed like forgotten memories. Whitaker set the glass down, untouched. He hadn't written Marcus Hill up, hadn't cuffed him, hadn't even officially logged the stop. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The next night, Whitaker adjusted his patrol route, just slightly. Jefferson Elementary wasn't technically in his sector, but no one questioned it. Late shifts were flexible, and besides, nothing ever happened there. He told himself he was just being thorough. At 11:18 p.m., he parked half a block away with his lights off. The school stood exactly as it had the night before, silent, dark, almost mournful under the glow of a single street lamp. Whitaker waited. 10 minutes passed. Then, headlights appeared at the corner. A gray sedan slowed, then pulled neatly along the curb across from the school. Whitaker's chest tightened. The driver stepped out. Same coat, same knit cap, same measured movements. Marcus Hill. Whitaker stayed in the car, engine idling low. Marcus didn't look around nervously, didn't sneak, didn't rush. He simply crossed the street and stopped at the fence, resting his hands lightly against the metal links like he was greeting an old friend. Then he stood there. No phone, no cigarette, no pacing. Just stillness. Whitaker checked his watch. 11:27. He waited. 5 minutes, 10. Marcus didn't move. Whitaker frowned. He expected something, some action that would confirm suspicion. A bag, a gesture, a habit. But Marcus did nothing. At exactly 11:45, Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a small notebook. Whitaker leaned forward slightly, watching through the windshield. He flipped it open, glanced at the page, and made a small mark with a pen. Then he closed the notebook, tucked it away, and resumed standing there, eyes fixed on the dark building. Whitaker felt an uncomfortable pressure behind his ribs. Attendance. At midnight, Marcus turned, walked back to his car, and drove away. No loitering, no crime, no explanation. The next night, Whitaker came again, and the next. Each time Marcus arrived within the same 10-minute window. Each time he stood at the same spot. Each time he marked something in that notebook. Whitaker didn't approach him again. He watched. And the longer he watched, the harder it became to square this quiet, ritualistic presence with any version of wrongdoing. On the fourth night, Whitaker did something he hadn't done in years. He ran a deeper background check. Marcus Hill wasn't a criminal. No priors, no warrants, no gang affiliations. But there was a file. Juvenile services. A closed case. Whitaker frowned, scrolling. The report was old, almost a decade. A child, a custody dispute, temporary foster placement. Then a line that made Whitaker's throat tighten. Child deceased. Whitaker sat back in his chair. Cause of death, complications related to untreated asthma. Location, Jefferson Elementary School. Whitaker's breath caught. He stared at the screen, then leaned forward again, rereading it slowly, carefully. The child had collapsed during an after-school program. Staff had called emergency services. Help had arrived, but too late. The boy was 7. 7. Whitaker closed his eyes. That night, when Marcus arrived, Whitaker didn't stay in his car. He stepped out. Not as an officer, as a man. Marcus noticed immediately. He stiffened slightly, but didn't raise his hands this time. Whitaker stopped a few feet away, keeping his distance. "You keep good time," Whitaker said quietly. Marcus glanced at him, then back at the school. "I try." Whitaker cleared his throat. "I looked you up." Marcus nodded. "I figured you might." Silence stretched. Whitaker gestured toward the building. "Your son?" Whitaker waited. "Eli," Marcus continued softly. "He loved this place. Not because of school, because of the after-school program. They let him read to the younger kids, made him feel important." Whitaker's chest tightened. "I come here every night because this is where he last felt like he belonged." Whitaker looked at the dark windows.
"I don't expect you to understand," Marcus added, "or approve." Whitaker shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "I think I'm starting to." Marcus looked at him for the first time, really looked. Whitaker's voice dropped. "That notebook, the attendance." Marcus hesitated, then pulled it out and handed it over. Whitaker opened it. Page after page of names, dates, check marks. "What is this?" Whitaker asked quietly, though he already knew. Kids I tutored, Marcus said. Most of them didn't have anyone keeping track, so I did. Whitaker flipped to the last page. One name stood alone. Eli Hill. No checkmark, just a star. Whitaker closed the notebook gently and handed it back. You're not trespassing, Whitaker said, after a long pause. Marcus looked at him, surprised. You're remembering, Whitaker continued, and I won't stop you. Marcus's eyes filled, just slightly. Thank you, he whispered. Whitaker nodded once. As he walked back to his patrol car, something shifted inside him. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about purpose, and he had a feeling this story wasn't finished yet.
By the end of the week, Jefferson Elementary wasn't just a forgotten building anymore. It was a problem. Officer Daniel Whitaker felt it the moment he stepped into the precinct that Monday morning. The air was different, tight, watchful. Conversations lowered when he passed. A few officers glanced up from their desks, then quickly looked away. He knew that look. It was the look people gave when a line had been crossed, and no one was quite sure who would be blamed for it yet. Whitaker? Sergeant Mills called from his office. In here, now. Daniel didn't rush, didn't stall either. He walked in with the steady pace of a man who'd worn the badge long enough to know when the ground beneath him was shifting. Mills shut the door behind him. You want to explain why I'm getting calls from City Council about a suspicious individual loitering at a closed school every night? Mills asked, folding his arms. Daniel kept his voice calm. I checked it out. He's not a threat. Mills raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Yes, sir. Because according to 2 residents on Maple Street, he's been watching the building, Mills said, fingers tapping the desk. One of them used the word casing. Daniel exhaled slowly. People see what they want to see. Mills leaned back. And what do you see? Daniel didn't answer right away. I see a father, he said finally, grieving. Mills' jaw tightened. That's not an official designation. No, but it's the truth. Silence pressed down between them. You didn't file a report. I didn't need to. You didn't detain him. There was no cause. Mills sighed. You know how this looks. Daniel nodded. Yes, sir, I do. Mills studied him for a long moment. The department's under a microscope right now, Dan. Body cams, civilian oversight. One complaint turns into a headline, and suddenly everyone's asking why protocol wasn't followed. Daniel met his gaze. Protocol exists to protect people, not punish them for mourning. Mills rubbed his temple. This man, Marcus Hill, he fits a profile whether you like it or not. Daniel's voice hardened just slightly. He fits your profile. Mills stiffened. Careful. Daniel straightened. With respect, sir, I've been careful my entire career. Careful not to escalate. Careful not to assume. Careful not to ruin someone's life because they happen to be in the wrong place with the wrong skin color. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Mills stood. This is bigger than you think. I know. That's why I'm standing here. Mills pointed toward the door. For now, stay off that block. Let patrol handle it. Daniel hesitated. Sir, that's an order. Daniel nodded once and left. But the city didn't stay quiet. That afternoon, a short video began circulating online, a shaky phone recording. Grainy, cropped. It showed a black man standing near a school fence at night while a patrol car idled nearby. No context, no sound beyond muffled voices. The caption read, "Why is this man allowed to loiter outside a closed school every night?" By evening, the comments were brutal. Lock him up. That's how kids go missing. If it were my neighborhood, I'd call the cops every night. Daniel watched the clip on his phone, jaw clenched. They hadn't filmed the notebook. They hadn't filmed the stillness. They hadn't filmed the grief. They never did. The next night, Daniel broke orders. He parked 2 streets away and walked. Marcus was already there. But this time, he wasn't alone. A woman stood across the street, arms crossed, phone raised. Marcus noticed Daniel and stiffened. "Should I leave?" Marcus asked quietly. "No," said Daniel, "you shouldn't." The woman stepped closer. "Officer, I called this in. This man's been here all week." Daniel turned. "Ma'am, he's not breaking any laws. That school's closed, and he's standing on public sidewalk." She scoffed. "You gonna wait until something happens?" Daniel held her gaze. "I'm gonna make sure nothing does." She muttered something under her breath and walked off. Marcus exhaled shakily. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah." "I don't want trouble," Marcus said. "I never did." "I know." Marcus hesitated. "If I stop coming, would that help?" Daniel looked at the school. The fence, the rusted swings, the locked doors holding years of silence. "No," he said. "It would only make it quieter." The next morning, the mayor's office released a statement. The city is reviewing reports of suspicious activity near closed educational facilities. Daniel read it twice. By noon, Internal Affairs requested a meeting. By evening, Marcus Hill's name was trending. That night, when Daniel arrived, the sidewalk was crowded. Not protesters, neighbors. Some angry, some afraid, some just curious. Marcus stood at the fence anyway, hands steady, eyes calm. A man shouted, "You don't belong here." Another yelled, "This is a school." Marcus didn't respond. Daniel stepped forward. "That's enough." Someone scoffed. "So you're protecting him now?" "I'm protecting the peace," Daniel said. An older woman spoke up. "My granddaughter went to school here," she said softly. "I remember the boy who died." The crowd shifted. "I remember his father," she continued. "He volunteered, fixed broken desks, brought books." Whispers rippled. A man muttered, "That's him?" The woman nodded. "That's him." Marcus swallowed hard. Daniel watched the tension crack, not shatter, but fracture. Truth had a way of doing that. Police sirens wailed in the distance, reporters began to arrive, and Daniel knew this was no longer about one man standing outside a school. This was about what the city chose to see and what it chose to ignore. And somewhere deep down, Daniel understood. Once you step over a line drawn by fear, you don't get to pretend you never saw what was on the other side. By Tuesday morning, Jefferson Elementary had become a stage. News vans lined the block like vultures waiting for something to die. Cables snaked across cracked sidewalks. Reporters practiced solemn expressions into their cameras, rehearsing outrage before the facts had even caught up. Officer Daniel Whitaker watched it all from across the street, coffee cooling in his hand. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Inside the precinct, the mood had curdled. "You're trending," Officer Ruiz muttered as Daniel passed his desk. Daniel didn't respond. Internal Affairs wanted statements. The captain wanted distance. City Hall wanted answers that fit neatly into a press release. And Marcus Hill? Marcus just wanted to stand where his son once laughed. Daniel found him that evening, earlier than usual, seated on the curb near the chain-link fence. His hands rested on his knees, posture calm, eyes tired. "They're saying things," Marcus said quietly, not looking up. Daniel nodded. "I know." "They called my sister," Marcus continued, "asked if I had ever been arrested, asked what kind of man I was." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You don't owe them anything." Marcus let out a humorless breath. "Feels like I owe everyone explanations just to exist." Daniel sat beside him, badge catching the streetlight. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," Daniel said. Marcus glanced at him. "Aren't you already risking enough?" Daniel met his eyes. "Some lines are worth crossing." Across the street, a reporter spotted them and motioned to her cameraman. Marcus noticed too, his shoulders tensed. "I don't want to be on TV," he said. "You won't be," Daniel replied, standing. He walked directly toward the reporter. "Officer Whitaker," she said brightly, "care to comment on why this individual has been allowed to—" "This man has a name, and he hasn't broken a single law." She smiled tightly. "The public is concerned." The public doesn't get to criminalize grief, Daniel said. Her smile faded. Are you saying the department condones? I'm saying you're chasing fear instead of facts, Daniel replied, and you know it. The cameraman lowered the lens. The reporter hesitated, then stepped back. Across the street, Marcus exhaled. But the calm didn't last. The next day, Daniel was pulled off patrol. Desk duty, no explanation, just an email with a subject line that read, "Pending review." He stared at the screen longer than necessary. By afternoon, a protest formed. Signs appeared. "Protect our children. Why is he still there? Where are the police?" Daniel stood at the precinct window, watching it grow. Across town, Marcus stood at the fence anyway. No sign, no chant, just stillness. A woman approached him cautiously. "Excuse me," she said. Did you know a boy named Elijah?" Marcus looked up sharply. "That was my son," he said. Her eyes filled. "He sat next to my niece in 2nd grade." Marcus swallowed. "He liked dinosaurs and drawing trains." She nodded. "He was kind." Word spread. By evening, the signs changed. "Remember Elijah. Let him grieve. This isn't a crime." A local teacher stepped forward, then a former custodian, a crossing guard, a librarian. Stories emerged. Elijah helping younger kids, Marcus fixing broken shelves, father and son staying late for reading programs. The narrative cracked. Inside City Hall, phones rang nonstop. By Thursday, the mayor called a press conference. "This city stands for compassion," she said stiffly. "We must balance safety with humanity." Daniel watched from the break room, arms crossed. Empty words. But words were starting to fail. That night, something changed. A patrol unit, not Daniel's, rolled up fast, lights flashing. An officer stepped out, hand resting too close to his belt. "Sir," he called, "I need you to step away from the fence." Marcus stood slowly. Daniel, watching from down the block, broke into a run. "There's been complaints," the officer continued. "You're causing a disturbance." "I'm not doing anything," Marcus said calmly. "Sir, step back." Daniel reached them. "He's not a threat." The officer frowned. "This isn't your call." Daniel stepped between them. "Yes, it is." The crowd gasped. Cameras rolled. "Officer Whitaker," the other officer said quietly, "stand down." Daniel didn't move. "Not today," he said. Marcus looked at him, eyes wide. "You don't have to do this," Marcus whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I already am." Silence stretched. Then a voice rang out. "That's enough." The captain stepped forward, face pale. "Everyone back," he ordered. The patrol officer hesitated, then complied. The captain turned to Marcus. "Sir, you're not under arrest." Marcus nodded. The captain turned to Daniel. "My office, now." Inside, the door shut hard. "You embarrass this department," the captain snapped. Daniel met his gaze. "We embarrassed ourselves the moment we mistook mourning for menace." The captain stared at him. Outside, the crowd waited. The city waited. And somewhere between concrete and memory, a father stood his ground. And a line, once drawn in fear, began to erase itself. By Friday morning, Jefferson Elementary was no longer just a neighborhood story. It was national. Daniel Whitaker woke to his phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. Messages stacked over one another, missed calls from his sister, texts from fellow officers, alerts from news apps he didn't remember installing. He sat up slowly, already knowing. Officer defies orders to defend suspicious man outside closed school. Grieving father or public threat, city divided. Police conduct under review after viral standoff. Daniel rubbed his face and exhaled. Across town, Marcus Hill sat at his kitchen table, staring at the same headlines on an old laptop borrowed from his sister. The words blurred together until they stopped meaning anything at all. He hadn't slept. Every sound outside his apartment felt louder now, every car door, every footstep in the hallway. Grief had always been heavy, but now it was public, debated, picked apart by strangers who had never known his son's laugh or the way Elijah used to tug his sleeve when he got excited. The phone rang. Marcus flinched. "Marcus?" his sister Denise said gently. "You don't have to go tonight." "Yes, I do," he replied quietly. "They're saying people are planning to show up again." "I know." "You don't owe them anything," she insisted. Marcus stared at the wall where Elijah's drawings were taped, crooked suns, stick figures holding hands. "I owe my son my presence." Denise swallowed. "Just be careful." "I always am." At the precinct, Daniel stood before a row of unfamiliar faces. Internal affairs. 2 men, 1 woman. All calm, all polite, all dangerous in their own quiet way. "Officer Whitaker," one of them began, "you understand why we're here." "Yes," Daniel said. "You disobeyed a direct order. I acted to prevent escalation. You placed yourself between a fellow officer and a civilian. I protected a man who posed no threat." The woman leaned forward. "Your personal feelings are not policy." Daniel met her gaze. "Neither is fear." A pause. "Do you believe race played a role in this situation?" the man asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes." Silence dropped like a weight. The woman scribbled something on her notepad. "You understand the implications of that statement," she said. "I understand the truth of it." They exchanged looks. "Until this investigation concludes," the man said, "you are placed on administrative leave." Daniel nodded once. "Turn in your badge and firearm." His chest tightened, but his hands were steady as he placed them on the table. Badge first, then the gun. Metal against wood. Final. That evening, Jefferson Elementary was surrounded again, but this time, it wasn't just neighbors. Veterans in old jackets, teachers holding candles, parents with children perched on shoulders, a pastor clutching a Bible, a woman holding a sign that read, "Grief is not a crime." Marcus arrived quietly, parking a block away. He walked toward the fence, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of being seen. Someone recognized him, then another. Whispers spread, not sharp this time, but reverent. A young man stepped forward. "Sir, I didn't know." Marcus nodded. Most people didn't. A woman approached, tears in her eyes. "My brother was killed last year. I sit outside his apartment sometimes. I thought I was crazy." "You're not," Marcus said. Across the street, Daniel stood in plain clothes. No badge, no authority, just a man. He watched as the crowd parted slightly to let Marcus reach the fence. Marcus placed his hand against the cold metal. The playground beyond was dark, empty, silent, except in his mind, where it was still alive. Daniel stepped closer. "I shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Marcus glanced at him. "Neither should grief be controversial." Daniel swallowed. A reporter pushed forward. "Marcus, do you feel safe here?" Marcus turned slowly. "I feel close to my son. That's all I've ever wanted." "Officer Whitaker," another called out, "do you regret defying your department?" Daniel looked at Marcus first, then at the cameras. "No," he said. "I regret that it took this much noise for people to listen." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone began to clap, then another, and another. It wasn't loud, it wasn't triumphant. It was steady, respectful. A patrol car rolled up slowly. Officers stepped out, but they didn't push forward. They stood back, uncertain. The captain arrived minutes later, face drawn. He took in the scene, the candles, the children, the signs, the father at the fence. For the first time, he didn't speak. He simply nodded to Marcus, and the crowd noticed. By the next morning, the city awoke to a different tone. Community rallies around grieving father. Officer on leave praised for restraint.
City promises policy review on suspicious behavior calls. Marcus returned to the school that night. Fewer cameras, more quiet. Daniel joined him. No one stopped them. A small boy approached Marcus shyly, holding a folded piece of paper. "This was for Elijah," he said. Marcus took it with trembling hands. Inside was a drawing of two stick figures under a sun. One had wings. Marcus knelt, unable to speak. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. In that moment, something shifted, not erased, not healed, but understood. The fence was still there, the school still closed, the pain still real, but the silence was finally broken. And sometimes, that's where justice begins.
By Monday morning, the narrative had shifted again. Not softened, sharpened. Marcus Hill's name was no longer whispered with sympathy alone. It was now paired with phrases like pattern of behavior, prior complaints, and unanswered questions. The same stations that had aired candlelight vigils now ran split-screen debates featuring men in suits who had never stepped foot near Jefferson Elementary. Daniel Whitaker watched it unfold from his couch, coffee untouched, jaw clenched. "They're digging," he muttered. Across the city, Marcus felt it too, like a cold draft sneaking through cracks you didn't know existed. A letter arrived that afternoon. Not handwritten, not kind. Notice of review, municipal property loitering investigation. Marcus read it twice before it settled in his chest. "They're trying to make me the problem," he said quietly to Denise over the phone. "They're scared," she replied, "so they're flipping it." At City Hall, the mayor's office buzzed with urgency. Protests were planned, sponsors were nervous, police unions were split. And at the center of it all stood a closed elementary school, a grieving black father, and a white officer who had refused to play along. Daniel received a call from the union president. "You're being used," the man said flatly. "You made us look divided." Daniel leaned back. "We are divided. That's not the point. It is to me." The line went quiet. "Watch yourself," the man warned. "They'll come for your record next." "They already have," Daniel replied, and hung up. That evening, Marcus arrived at Jefferson Elementary to find the fence plastered with new signs. "Justice for Elijah. Grief is not a crime. Let him mourn." But across the street, a smaller group stood apart, arms crossed, phones raised, eyes hard. A man shouted, "Why here every night? What are you hiding?" Marcus didn't respond. He pressed his palm to the fence like always, but his breath was heavier tonight. Daniel arrived moments later, tension visible in his shoulders. "They're trying to bait you," he said quietly. "I know," Marcus replied. A woman stepped forward from the opposing group. "Sir, do you have permission to be here?" Marcus turned slowly. "My son learned to read here. Do you have permission to question that?" The woman scoffed. "Rules apply to everyone." Daniel stepped between them. "Ma'am, this is not the place." "Or what? You gonna arrest me without your badge?" The words landed like a slap. Daniel didn't flinch. "No, I'm gonna ask you to show respect." "Respect is earned," another man called out. Marcus closed his eyes. This was what grief looked like when it became public property. A patrol car pulled up, then another. The crowd stiffened. The new officers were younger, sharper, less patient. One of them approached Marcus. "Sir, we've received complaints." Daniel stepped forward instinctively. The officer raised a hand. "Sir, please step back." Marcus felt the shift, the familiar tightening of air, the old script trying to reclaim its stage. "I'm not breaking any laws," Marcus said evenly. "We're determining that," the officer replied. Cameras lifted, phones clicked. Daniel recognized the look in the officer's eyes, not cruelty, but caution sharpened into suspicion. He spoke carefully. "He's been cleared to be here, multiple nights, no incidents."
The officer glanced at Daniel. "And you are?" "Someone who knows the difference between presence and threat." The officer's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm gonna ask you both to disperse." The crowd murmured. A pastor stepped forward. "This man is praying. Then he can pray at home." That was when Marcus finally broke his silence. "My home," he said softly, "is wherever my son still feels close." The officer hesitated. Just a beat. Enough for the moment to tip. A woman from the crowd shouted, "Let him stay!" Another voice joined, "This is wrong!" Daniel watched the officer weigh his options, authority on one side, optics on the other. The radio crackled. The captain's voice. "Stand down," it said. "No removals tonight." Relief rippled through the crowd. The officers retreated. But the damage was done. Later that night, Marcus sat alone on his couch, the quiet pressing in. The doorbell rang. Daniel stood there, holding a folder. "They pulled my disciplinary file," Daniel said. Marcus nodded. "They sent me paperwork, too." Daniel handed him the folder. This was my dad's. Inside were newspaper clippings, old ones, from the 1980s. A black man stopped repeatedly outside a factory after hours, accused, harassed, cleared, too late. "That was my grandfather," Daniel continued. "He worked night shifts, came early to sit in his car." Marcus looked up slowly. "They never apologized," Daniel continued. "They just stopped showing up." Marcus swallowed. History doesn't repeat, it waits. The next day, a school board meeting was called, emergency session. Public comment overflowed. Teachers spoke, parents cried, veterans stood. Then Marcus took the microphone. His hands shook, but his voice didn't. "I am not a symbol," he said. "I am a father. I didn't ask to represent anything but my love for my child." He paused. "But if my grief makes you uncomfortable, maybe ask why." Applause filled the room. Daniel watched from the back, heart pounding. Then the superintendent stood. "We are reviewing our policies regarding after-hours presence," she said carefully, "and we will designate Jefferson Elementary as a memorial space during evening hours." Gasps. Marcus closed his eyes. Not victory, but acknowledgement. Outside, reporters swarmed. "Marcus, do you forgive the department?" He shook his head gently. "Forgiveness comes after listening." "And Officer Whitaker?" another asked. "What happens to him?" Daniel stepped forward himself. "I'll accept whatever consequences come, but I won't apologize for choosing humanity." That night, Jefferson Elementary was quieter. No shouting, no sirens, just candles. And two men standing side by side. Not because they were the same, but because they refused to look away. The backlash hadn't ended, but it had changed, and sometimes that's how the tide turns. Not with force, but with enough people finally saying, enough. The morning after the school board meeting felt different. Not lighter, not peaceful, heavier. Like the city itself was holding its breath. Marcus Hill stood at his kitchen sink, staring out the window as dawn stretched pale fingers across the street. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elijah's smile, missing front tooth, backpack too big for his shoulders, waving from the school steps like he always did. Daniel Whitaker sat at his own kitchen table across town, uniform folded neatly beside him, untouched. His phone buzzed non-stop. Missed calls, texts, voicemails he wasn't ready to hear. The backlash hadn't ended, it had simply gone quiet. And quiet, Daniel knew, was never empty. It was calculating. At 9:03 a.m., Marcus received an email. Subject, formal notice, employment review. He opened it slowly. The nonprofit where he worked part-time, youth outreach, weekend programs, was temporarily suspending him pending review. No accusation, no explanation, just concern about public perception. Marcus let out a slow breath. "They're scared of shadows," he murmured. By noon, his phone buzzed again. This time, a blocked number. "Mr. Hill, this is Alan Kruger from Hamilton and Pierce Legal Consulting. I represent an interested party." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Interested in what?" "Resolving things quietly," the man replied. "You've been through a lot. We'd like to offer support." "What kind of support?" "A financial settlement. Non-disclosure, no more media, no more misunderstandings." Marcus closed his eyes. "How much?" he asked, not because he wanted it, but because he needed to hear the number to remind himself why he wouldn't take it. Kruger named a figure that would have erased Marcus's debts, paid off his mother's medical bills, funded a college account that would never be used. Marcus felt his chest ache. "No," he said. There was a pause. "Think carefully," Kruger warned. "This attention can turn quickly." "It already has, and I'm still here." He hung up. Across the city, Daniel sat in a small office with beige walls in a single ticking clock. Internal affairs. A woman with tired eyes flipped through a file. "You broke protocol." "I followed my conscience." "That's not a policy." "Maybe it should be." She sighed. "You contradicted an officer, on camera." "I prevented harm." "You undermined authority." "I upheld it." Silence stretched. Finally, she closed the folder. "You'll be placed on administrative leave, without pay, pending further review." Daniel nodded. He'd expected it. What he hadn't expected was the weight in his chest. Not fear, not anger, but something closer to grief. He thought of his father's stories, his grandfather's silence, and he wondered if this was how cycles tried to keep spinning. That evening, Jefferson Elementary filled again, but this time there were fewer signs, more folding chairs. Neighbors brought casseroles. Someone strung soft white lights along the fence. It felt less like a protest, more like a vigil that had learned how to breathe. Marcus arrived just after sunset. Daniel was already there, in jeans and a jacket, no badge. "Did you know," Daniel said quietly, "my mom taught here for a year. Substitute, 3rd grade." Marcus looked at him, surprised. "She quit," Daniel continued. "Said she couldn't handle watching kids carry things adults gave them." Marcus nodded slowly. Some of them never put it down. A woman approached them hesitantly, older, gray hair pulled tight. "I'm sorry," to Marcus, she said. "I used to cross the street when I saw you here. I don't know what I thought." Marcus met her eyes. "Thank you for saying that." She nodded, tears brimming. "My grandson goes to Jefferson now. I want him to know this place remembers." Word spread. More people came. Not reporters, listeners. A retired teacher told stories of Elijah helping classmates with reading. A janitor admitted he used to sit in his car after hours too, because home felt too empty. A veteran spoke about how grief makes people uncomfortable because it refuses to be efficient. Daniel watched it unfold and realized something unsettling. The story was no longer controllable, and that terrified the people who needed it to stay small. The next morning, an anonymous blog published photos, old ones, Marcus outside the school, months earlier, time-stamped, captioned. Why was he there even before his son's death? The implication hung heavy. Marcus read it on his phone, hands trembling. "They're digging backward now," he said to Denise when she called, "trying to rewrite time." "Let them," she replied. "Truth has a long memory." But the damage was immediate. Comments flooded in. Suspicion crept back. Marcus's sister called in tears. "People are saying things at work." Daniel saw the article too, then another, then another. Each one sharper, each one less careful. That afternoon, Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You picked the wrong side." He stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. At 7:14 p.m., a town hall was announced, live streamed.
Community Dialogue on Safety and Trust. Daniel almost laughed. Marcus almost didn't go, but then he remembered Elijah's hand slipping into his. "I'll speak," Marcus said finally. The auditorium was packed, tension thick as to taste. The police chief spoke first, then the mayor. Carefully chosen words, careful distance. Then Marcus walked to the microphone. No notes, no theatrics. "My son," he began, "used to ask why grown-ups whispered so much." A murmur rippled. He said, "If it's important, why don't they say it out loud?" Marcus looked around the room. "I came to that school every night because it was the last place Elijah felt brave, and I stayed because grief doesn't punch a clock." Silence. "I didn't know my presence would scare people, but I know this. If a father mourning his child feels threatening, then something is broken far beyond me." Applause rose, slow, then steady. Daniel was standing in the back, eyes burning. Then a man stood up, middle-aged, well-dressed. "What about the rules?" he demanded. "What about safety?" Marcus nodded. "Rules matter, safety matters, but so does context and compassion." He paused. "You can enforce rules without erasing people." The room went quiet. That's when Daniel stepped forward. He hadn't planned to speak, but his feet moved anyway.
"I stopped a man because I was trained to see threat," he said. "Then I listened and realized the greater danger was what happens when we stop listening." A beat. "I'm paying for that choice," Daniel continued, "but I'd make it again." The crowd erupted. Not cheers, something deeper. Recognition. Outside, as the night cooled, Marcus and Daniel stood beneath the school's old oak tree. "You think this changes anything?" Marcus asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "I think it already has," he said. "They're just catching up." Across the street, a little girl tugged her mother's sleeve. "Why are there lights?" she asked. Her mother knelt beside her. "To remember," she said. Marcus watched them, heart aching and full all at once. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like pressure. It felt like space. And sometimes, space is where truth finally has room to stand. The school stood quiet again. Not abandoned, not forgotten, just still. Jefferson Elementary hadn't looked this way since the summer Elijah was born. Windows dark, playground empty, the old oak tree shedding leaves one by one like it understood the language of letting go. Marcus Hill stood at the gate, long after everyone else had left. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and distant traffic. He rested his hand on the chain-link fence, the same place he had leaned night after night, unseen and misunderstood. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to stay. Behind him, Daniel Whitaker approached slowly. No cameras, no speeches. Marcus nodded. Good. They stood side by side, not speaking. Two men bound by a moment neither had asked for, one marked by loss, the other by choice. "You know," Daniel said after a while, "they reinstated me today." Marcus turned. "With pay?" "With an apology," Daniel replied. "Quiet, internal, but it happened." Marcus exhaled. "That matters." "It does," Daniel agreed, "but it's not the point." Marcus smiled faintly. "No, it's not." A breeze rattled the flagpole. The American flag whispered overhead, half lit by the street lamp. "Tomorrow," Marcus said, "they're reopening the school. Counselors, new security lights, a plaque." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "A plaque?" Marcus nodded. "Elisha's name, for community resilience." Daniel swallowed. "How do you feel about that?" Marcus thought carefully. "I don't need his name on metal. I need his story to change how people see each other." Daniel nodded. "That's harder." "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. but it lasts longer. The next morning, Jefferson Elementary buzzed with cautious life. Parents lingered longer than usual. Teachers smiled with effort. Children whispered, sensing something important but not knowing how to name it. Marcus stood across the street, watching. He didn't cross over. Not yet. A small boy tugged his mother's hand. "Why is that man crying?" The mother looked, then knelt. "Because he loved someone very much." The boy nodded. "That's okay then." Marcus wiped his eyes. Inside the building, a staff meeting was underway. The principal cleared her throat. "We've had difficult weeks, but we're moving forward, together." A teacher raised her hand. "Are we allowed to talk about what happened?" The room went still. The principal paused. "Yes," she said, "we are." That single sentence loosened something that had been tightly wound for years. Stories spilled out, regrets, fears, small moments that had been misunderstood. Healing didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived quietly. Across town, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, reviewing paperwork for a new assignment. Community liaison. No patrol car, no sirens, just conversations. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Officer Whitaker?" a voice said. Older, steady. "This is Reverend James Holloway." Daniel straightened. "Yes, sir? I'd like to invite you to speak at our church this Sunday. About listening." Daniel blinked. "Me?" "You," the Reverend confirmed. "You reminded folks that authority doesn't mean distance." Daniel swallowed. "I'd be honored." When he hung up, he stared at the wall for a long time. He thought of his father, who had taught him to obey, his mother, who had taught him to question, and Marcus, who had taught him to stay. That afternoon, Marcus visited the cemetery. Elisha's headstone was small, too small. Marcus knelt, brushing away fallen leaves. "They're going back to school," he said softly. "They're talking, some of them really listening." He smiled sadly. "You'd like that." He placed a folded piece of paper at the base of the stone. Inside was a drawing, crayon lines of a school with lights in every window, a little boy holding hands with two stick figures, one tall, one shorter, both smiling. "I'm going to stop coming at night, but I'll come during the day, right?" The wind stirred, gentle. Marcus stood, and for the first time since the accident, he didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. Weeks passed. The media moved on, as it always did. But something stayed. At Jefferson Elementary, a new program began. Parents invited into classrooms, evening hours for community meetings, a bench placed beneath the oak tree with a small inscription, "Sit, listen, remember." Daniel attended his first community meeting in plain clothes. No badge, just a notebook. Marcus was there too, sitting quietly in the back. Their eyes met. A nod. Nothing more was needed. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Marcus returned to the schoolyard, not to mourn, but to volunteer. A little girl struggled with her reading. He knelt beside her. "Take your time." She looked up. "Were you the man on the news?" Marcus hesitated. "Yes." She smiled. "My mom says you're brave." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "So are you," he said. Across the yard, Daniel helped a boy fix a broken bike chain. "Did you really stop a bad guy?" Daniel chuckled. "No." "What did you do then?" "I stopped myself from making a bad mistake." The boy considered that. "That's harder." Daniel nodded. "It is." As dusk settled, the school lights glowed softly. Not harsh, not glaring. Warm. Marcus locked the gate behind him. For the first time, he didn't look back, because he didn't need to. The story hadn't ended with an arrest or a headline. It had ended the way real change often does, with people choosing to see each other fully and walking the long way home, together.